Okay, we are at the two dots on Yud Aleph Amud Bet 11b, 3, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom, 7 lines up from the bottom. Here we go. Ba'i Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asks, Hare alai kebasar zivche shlamim leachar zrikat hadam. Mahu. Person has a piece of meat, which is a kosher piece of meat, a regular piece of meat, and he says, I want this meat, or a piece of bread, whatever, and he says, I want this item to be like meat of a korban shlamim after the sprinkling of the blood. Now, korban korban shlamim is allowed to be eaten by, part of it is eaten by the owners, but it could only be eaten after zirkat damim. So this would seem very easy, like after zirkat damim, that's when it's allowed. So you're saying, I want this piece of meat to be like basar shlamim after zirkat damim. That's allowed. So what's the question over here? Says the Gemara. So he says, wow, what's the halacha about this? If he says exactly as we quoted this lashon exactly, he's hanging on to, he's connecting to heter, to what's allowed, and that's pashut that it's allowed, and it would be allowed. Ella, rather, the case is as follows: Kegon demachit basar zivche shlamim. It was laid in front of him a piece of meat of shlamim. Umachit dehetera gabe, and in front of him was laid also a piece of regular meat. And for some reason he wanted to make a neder, and he says ve'amar ze kazeh, and he says this regular piece of meat is like this piece of meat, is like this shlamim. So the Gemara asks, "Mai, what is the halacha? Beikaro kamatfis or behetera kamatfis?" What are we connecting to when I say this piece of meat is like this shlamim? And this shlamim is also, it seems like, la'achar zrikat, I think it's also la'achar zrikat damim. But you say ze kazeh. What do you want to say? Do you want to say be'ikaro kamatvis or behetera kamatvis? Okay. Be'ikaro and behetera kamatvis. So let's go in the stages of a korban. A korban starts off as a regular animal, and a regular animal is allowed. I could do whatever I want with this animal, regular animal. I could use it for my own use. Then I make a neder on the animal and say this animal is going to be a korban shlamim. At that moment, I can't use it for my own use. It's hekdesh. And then we do the shechita. We offer the sacrifice. After the sprinkling of the blood, that piece of meat that the owner receives is allowed to be used. I could consume it for my own. So it goes from a case that's allowed, it's a regular piece of animal. A neder causes it to be a korban. After the process of the korban, after zirkat damim, now it's allowed. So when I have an allowed piece of meat that you just go to Sobeys, buy a piece of meat, not a korban, nothing, and I say this kazeh, I want this piece of meat to be like this, to be like this korban shlamim after zirkat damim. Am I saying that it's like? Am I saying that it's like this, the state that it's in now? Now it's allowed, or am I saying ikaro? Am I saying like it's ikar? And the ikar was no. I don't go back to it as an animal, but rather as a korban, and korban is not allowed.
So one question: before is permitted or forbidden? After the zakat
After zakat damim is permitted.
Okay.
It's permitted. So we say if a person says ze kazeh, mai beikaro kamatvis, are we going back to the ikar, which is, and if you look quickly at the Ran, 4 lines up from the bottom, beikaro kamatvis beisuro sheaya kodem zrikat damim. Do I go back to when it was asur before the sprinkling, or behetera kamatvis, or back to the Gemara bottom line, or when it's allowed? When I say just ze kazeh, do I go with what the situation is now? It's allowed, or do I go? It's a korban. At the end of the day, it's a korban shlamim, ikaro, or do I go in the situation it is now? Okay. Amar Rava, says Rava, Tashma, come in here, that we can learn from here a situation that we go with the ikar, we go with the not that it's allowed now, but we go to the ikar isur. What's that case? Notar upigul. So we had a list earlier in our Mishnah. Notar and pigul. So we said notar is the korban that was supposed to be eaten in a certain time and did not get eaten in that time, and it's still here, and that's called notar. Notar is like leftover, and that's asur now. It's asur now. And pigul is that when you did the kohen thought about a different korban or thought about eating it at a different time, and that made it asur. Okay, so Gemara says as follows: Tashma notar upigul, ve'ha notar upigul lachar zrikat damimu. Meaning, notar and pigul are things that are asur. Mr. Bigzer, is it possible to put on mute? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I figured something like that would happen. Okay, so now, when we saw in our Gemara earlier, when it said notar pigul is asur, that's what we said. If you remember earlier in the Mishnah, if I say this is like notar, you don't have to say even ken notar, whatever. It's asur, right? So notar asks the Gemara is after zrikat damim. So let's go back to the order. You have an animal, which is allowed. Neder, that makes it a korban, not allowed. I can't use it for my own stuff. Then zrikat damim, now I can eat this animal. Now it's allowed. But after zrikat damim, it's allowed, but then it could get to a point where you're supposed to only eat it in a certain time. After you don't eat it in that time, it becomes notar, now it's not allowed again. But if we said that the whole thing was after zrikat damim, it's allowed, notar is also after zrikat damim. So, if notar is after zrikat damim, but we still said that notar is asur, it means you're going back to the ikar avera of notar, and I don't go to what's happening now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
One second. So what's the question? So what happens is when a person made this neder, now this korban is going to be asur, it's a korban. But after zrikat dam, it removes my neder. It now makes this korban allowed to me. Nevertheless, it's asur by notar. It must be we go back to the ikar. Yeah, that's what's going on. So, because what happens over here is we want to still figure out this case of zeh kazeh, kosher piece of meat, regular piece of meat, and this korban shlamim after zrikat damim. Zeh kazeh. So, do I go with the state that it's in now, which is achar zrikat damim, and it's allowed, or do I go with the ikar that it's a korban shlamim? So we said, well, hold on. I'll point out to you that a case of notar is asur. What's a case of notar? Notar is also achar zrikat damim. Okay, it's a little too far, and it's notar. So you might say, well, maybe go to the point of achar zrikat damim, but not consider it notar. No, it's already notar. Once notar, I go back to the ikar. I go back to the ikar averav of it being a korban, and therefore it's going to be, we're going to the ikaro. So that's what we want to try proving. We don't go to what it is now, we go to the ikar. Says the Gemara that we're now going to answer that when we said notar, it's not talking about notar of shlamim, but notar of olah. Let's see. Amar le Rahuna b'reder of Natan v'notar shel olah. We're not talking about notar of shlamim, rather notar of olah. There's a big difference. A korban shlamim is eaten by part of the mizbeach, part the kohen, part the owner. Korban chatat is eaten part the mizbeach, part the kohen, not the owner. Korban olah is only eaten by the mizbeach, not the kohen or not the owner. So korban olah, so notar shel olah is referring to the like that it was not eaten by anyone, but it means it was not put on the mizbeach in the right time. But there's never a time that you could eat it. So when a person says, this is harezek notar, there's never a chance of it being allowed if it's notar of olah. If you look at it as notar of shlamim, then hold on. Well, am I looking at it as it's after Zukat Tamim? After Zukat Tamim, it's allowed. And then when it hits notar, it's not allowed anymore. Do I go to after Zukat Tamim, or do I go to the Ikar, which is it's a korban and it's asur? When it comes to korban olah, it's always asur. And notar of olah is asur, meaning you didn't put on the mizbech, but it's always asur. So basically, we don't have a proof to our question. Zekazeh. The case of zekazeh explicitly is shlamim. Here, I don't try to bring a proof of notar. Our Mishnah of notar is talking about notar of olah.
So can we understand the question of shlamim as if you say this meat is going to be like shlamim to me, which means that only after you drop off the blood, you can eat it for a while, like I think till the midnight, right?
Yeah, it depends. Two nights, 1 day, 2 days.
Okay, are you putting yourself a time frame to eat it, which makes it a neder because it's very meaningful?
No, I don't think when you say my kosher food is like this shlamim, I don't think you're making it mamash korban that you can only eat within that 2 days. No, I just think are you comparing it to this meat that's now allowed to me, or do I say it goes to the korban shlamim, like it's a korban now, and this is asur to me? That's what you're saying. Not that this is never going to be. It's not a korban. It's a piece of meat from Sobeys, so it's never going to be restricted to 2 days, 1 night, whatever.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. Third line down. Now that we say notar of olah, says the Gemara, Amar le im ken litni bibasar olah. Says the Gemara, if we're talking about a case of olah, then don't say notar. Say in our Mishnah basar olah. Meaning, if notar of olah, just say basar olah. Just say basar olah, and basar olah is always going to be asur. Meaning, when I say notar can also be notar of shlamim. So, notar is always asur. But once I have shlamim there, maybe you're going on the after zikat damim, which is going to be mutar. So, to make it easy that it's notar of olah and it's always going to be asur, just say basar olah. Answers the Gemara, lo mibaya ka'amar. The Gemara gives a certain type of answer called a lo mibaya. Lo mibaya is, obviously, if I would have said this, you would have understood it, but I said this in order to say this that's not as obvious. Lo mibaya ka'amar. Lo mibaya basar olah de asur. It wasn't a question about basar olah that's asur. That's for sure asur. Deha bekorban kamatfis. Because you are connecting to korban. Notaru pigul deolah itzricha. But notar and pigul of a korban olah, that's what the chidush is over here. There's basar olah and notar av olah. Basar olah is always asur. Now notar upigul deolah, that's what we need. What do we need? What's the chidush there? Sal kadai tachamina. I would have thought ki isur notar ki isur pigul v'havale kematpis bedavar haasur v'lo mitzar k'mashmalan. Okay, let's read that again. Lomi by kamar. Let's go back up to the fourth line down. It's teaching us a lomi by. I didn't need to say this, but I said it in order to say this. Lomi by. I didn't need to say basar olah de asur. Basar olah that's asur. I didn't need to say that because the abe korban kamatfis. You're connecting to the korban, and that's for sure asur. Notaru pigul de olah itzricha. But notar and pigul of olah, that's what was needed. That's what was needed to say. That's why I needed notar in the Mishnah. Salkadat Chachamim, I would have thought, ki isur notar, ki isur pigul, v'havale kematfis bedavar ha'asur v'lo mitzar. It would have maybe been, I would have thought it was like I'm connecting to something that is asur be'ikaro, but it's not going to be asur. So kamash malan is asur. So what's the case? 1 second. What's the note? Okay. So like this. When it comes to Nedarim, I should have said this at the beginning. I think we said this earlier shiurim, and even in the introductory shiur. You could only make a neder on something that was once allowed and then was later asur. Let's say a korban. A korban was once an animal that was made asur. So if I say, I want to make this piece of meat like this, like a korban, that neder could work because I am like matpis, like I'm copying or I'm connecting this kosher piece of meat to this item that was once kosher and is not kosher anymore through a neder. So I'm making this neder is like that neder. That's okay, and this now is going to be asur. But if I say this is like chazir, no, you can't compare. You might think that's, what do you mean? That's the most obvious comparison. This is like chazir, it's asur. No, if I say this is like chazir, this is allowed. Why? Because chazir is intrinsically asur, was never mutar, was never allowed. So I can't say this is like that. This is mutar. This is a kosher piece of meat I just bought from Sobeys or Olive Branch or whatever you buy, right? No frills. Right? This is a kosher piece of meat. I said this is like chazir. No, it's not like chazir. Chazir is asur intrinsically from the Torah. Asur chazir. So how do I make this like asur? If I'm comparing it to something that was once allowed and became asur, I can make that comparison. This is like a korban. Oh, a korban was once allowed and now it's asur. So I could say that this was like a korban. And with that, we're gonna.
The Mishnah doesn't it say lo kasher as well? One of the in the Mishnah says lechulin she'ochel lecha lo kasher, and then velo dachi tahor v'tameh. So one of the options is lo kasher. So isn't that including?
Lo kasher might be because of bad shechita. Not necessarily. It wasn't. It was like always not kosher from the beginning. So it's not always the same case. But might be.
That's my question. So the shchita for notar and pigul is from the start, basically. Where does shchita comes from?
So
for the pigul, notar.
So that's what we're gonna get to now. So
Like it was kosher before.
Okay.
It was pigul or notar, right?
right,
It made itself.
right.
And then it became unkosher.
No, like
So that's what we wanna say now.
Anyways, anytime. Notar is like whatever is left over from the korban.
Yeah.
Like when you pass the time. So
And it's never gonna be kosher again.
yeah, but like it has nothing to do with shechita. Shechita is kosher, and you have to finish it in a certain time.
Right.
You couldn't, so it's notar.
Okay.
Like so, it's not kosher.
So with that understanding of the how to work nedarim, let's plug this back in. Lomi by kamar, lomi by basar ola de asur, de have a korban kamat piece. Basar ola is asur because you're connecting to korban, meaning basar ola was once a kosher animal, and it's asur when I say this is compared to basar ola. The korban kamat piece, meaning you're mamash comparing your neder to a korban, which is korban is asur via a neder. There's two, but notar pigul de ola, but notar and pigul of ola, it's tzricha. We need to tell you a chidush in our Mishnah that when I say this piece of meat is like notar of ola, which again just to make because notar shlamim could be mutar at one point, so notar of ola, which was never allowed. Now I say, this is like notar avola. You might think, as we say over here, salka daitach amina. You might have thought, ki isur notar, ki isur pigul, v'havalev kematpis bedavar ha'asur velo mitzar. It's like you're connecting to something that's asur b'ikaro, like pig, and it's not allowed. Sorry, v'lo mit, and it's not asur. Kamash malan. The chidush is, when I say this is like a korban, then yeah, this piece of meat is going to be like a korban, and a korban was once allowed, and now it's not allowed, so this is also not going to be allowed. But if I say this is like notar, you might think notar is like chazir. Now, notar also had a history, right? Remember that it was up and down. It started a kosher animal, korban, after Zukat Tamim was allowed, and now it's not allowed anymore. It's notar. So, in the question form of the Gemara says, you might think though that when I say specifically this is like notar, I'm specifically connecting to the end of the story. Notar. Notar is never allowed. So maybe notar is like chazir, that we kind of forget about the earlier part of the story of notar, because I'm saying this is like notar. I'm going straight to that isur part of time. So maybe it's like chazir, and if I say this is like notar, then this is going to be allowed, because you can't compare it to something that's isur mikaro. Answers the Gemara, Kamashmalan, no, notar is, this item is going to be asur, because notar did have a history. Notar was once, it's different than chazir. Meaning, even though I'm when I say this is like a korban's asur now. No, but korban was once mutar. So this is compared to, this is I want to make a neder on this like a korban. Korban was also a neder. It was also once allowed, now it's not allowed. Notar. So yeah, notar has a history, but I might look at, when I say notar, I might look at the end result. And notar is asur. All notar in the world, if I go to a food store, all these meats, notar is asur. It's like chazir in a certain way. So you say, okay, if I compare this to notar, maybe you'll say that I can't compare it to notar. Notar is maybe intrinsically asur. And the Gemara answers, no, we still have to look back in its history. Even though you're pointing to the end of the story, which is notar, like if I have a piece of korban shlamim, the story is not over yet, because it's kosher now, but if it could become notar later, so it's kosher now, so okay, it still moves, but notar, it's over, it's notar, never could be kosher again. So you might look at it like that's like chazir now. Answers the Gemara, no, that's the chidush. The chidush is, it's not compared to chazir, it still has you go back in its history, and that's when it says notar is asur, that's what it means. So this last piece, we still don't have a proof to our question of zeh kazeh, because zeh kazeh was, we're talking about shlamim. Like this kosher piece of meat is like a shlamim, so that we didn't answer yet. But this last piece was when we introduced notar of olah. Just say basar olah. So basar olah, the Gemara says, is pashut, that it's your piece of meat could compare to basar olah, and therefore this is going to be asur. So basar olah was once it's a regular korban. But what about notar? We needed to say notar. I mean, the Gemara's question was say basar olah and don't say notar. The Gemara answers no. We need to say notar, because you would have thought notar is like chazir. Kamash malan, notar is not like chazir. It's regular. Metive. 3, 6, 9 lines down. First one on the line. Metive, a question. Izehu isar ha'amur b'Torah. So the Torah tells us when it comes to Nedarim, le'esor isar al nafsho. When a person makes a oath to oser something on himself. What is that case? What is he oser on himself? This is the Gemara. Amar hareni shelo ochel basar v'shelo eshte yain. Behold, I am not going to eat meat or not going to drink wine. Keyom shemet bo aviv, like the day that my father died, that I didn't eat meat or drink wine on that day. That's the type of neder I'm doing. Or keyom shemet bo rabo, or the day that my rabbi died, I didn't eat meat or didn't eat wine. I'm not going to eat meat or wine now. Keyom sheneherag bo Gedalia ben Achikam, like Tzom Gedalia. Meaning, this is a person later on in life, in the middle of the year. He says, I'm not eating this piece of meat like I didn't eat on Tzom Gedalia. Like I didn't eat when my father died. Like I didn't eat when my rabbi died. Or, Keyom she'raiti Yerushalayim bechurbana, on the day that I saw Yerushalayim destroyed. I didn't eat meat that day, so I'm not eating meat now like that day. Okay. V'amar Shmuel, V'hu shenadur beoto hayom. Says Shmuel, and the case is that you made the neder on the same day. So, what does it mean you made it on the same day? Hechidami, what's the case? Lav kegon isn't the case. Dekai bechad b'shabbat demit be'avua isn't the case. Let's say like on a Sunday that your father passed. Ve'af agav deika, and even though there are many deika tuva chad b'shabbat dehetera, even though there's many of those Sundays that you were allowed and you did eat meat on, Viktani asur, but it still says asur. Shma mina, you learn from here, be'ikaru matfis. You go back to the first Sunday. What it means is as follows. A person says, I'm not going to eat meat. Let's say this example, like the day that my father died. Actually, I don't like that example, but the day that my father passed, whatever, that's the we're using it over here. So a person says, I'm not going to eat meat like the day of passing of someone's father, his father. So we want to know what's that case exactly. So we said that he made the neder on that day. What does it mean on that day? On that day, later on Sunday, the yom was, let's say, a Sunday. So let's say 20 Sundays later, his father passes away on a Sunday, and he doesn't eat meat that day. 20 Sundays later, he says, I'm not going to eat meat like the day that I didn't eat when my father died. So we want to say a proof from here the following. What happens? The halakha is asur. You can't eat meat. You connected that day, 20 weeks later, to that day that to that Sunday that your father passed. But hold on a second. There were so many Sundays in the between that I ate meat. There were so many Sundays in the middle that were the hetera. You see from over here, when a person says, like the day that my father died, you go back to the ikar day, even though there's so many weeks in between. So we want to try asking a question from here. That you go be'ikarohu matvis. That you go back to the ikar. That was when he says zekazeh. That's our whole question is back to that case. Zekazeh. This kosher piece of meat is like this shlamim. Like the shlamim now when it's allowed, or like the shlamim before zrikat damim when it was like a regular korban. Do we go to its ikar or we go to what it is now? And this guy's father died. He didn't eat meat. 20 weeks later, he says, I want today to be like that day. Hold on a second. Today, it's mutar. There was 20 weeks in between that you ate on that day. 20 Sundays, like that day. There's been a lot of those days, those last 20 weeks. Says the Gemara, no, it's asur. Like the day mamash of your father died. So you see, you go back to the ikar, you go back to the beginning.
But the next Sunday is still mutar.
And the next Sunday after that will be mutar.
Wait, but on the day that he died, it's okay until they have burial. And then
Yeah, so we're not talking about halachot of evelut over here.
Okay.
We're not talking about halachot of avilut, like that's because what do you mean he didn't? Right. Also, Gedalia ben Achikam, we are gonna see about Tzom Gedalia a little bit in the run, because that's asur that was.
I thought in general Nedarim was to do an isur on something. So why would there be an option of him? Thinking about the other Sundays, like why are we even considering other Sundays where he could eat meat and drink wine if he's trying to make an isur on himself?
Yeah, but there was a lot of other Sundays in between the day of passing of his father till this day that he's making this neder. So you want to say, I want this, like Sunday is the day of his father's passing. I want this Sunday to be like the Sunday of my father's passing, but there's like not the date, the Gimel Tevet or whatever that date. It's the Sunday, but there's a lot of Sundays in between, and you didn't treat it like your father's Sunday. So maybe we should say, well, sorry, you gotta wait till Mamash is your side, or you can't do that comparison. No, he could do that comparison, and that Sunday is gonna be like that Sunday, even though there's a lot of other Sundays in between. So we say we go back to the Ikar. That's what the Gemara wants to say.
I have a lot of questions, but we don't have time.
Too many questions?
Yeah.
Metiv. let's read it again. Metive ezehu isar ha'amur b'Torah. Le'esor isar al nafsho. Amar, person says, Hareni lo ochel, Hareni shelo ochel basar, shelo ishte yain, keyom shemet bo aviv, keyom shemet bo rabo.
They meant the day of the week.
Day of the week.
But it doesn't make sense to me in Hebrew. Like,
Yeah, you thought like
doesn't
the
say
mamash the day.
yeah, it doesn't say week, right?
It's keyom, like the exact day,
Kiyom mean like the day of the week.
the date of the the day of the week, like a Sunday.
Okay.
That's what's going on over here, right? כיום שנהרג בו יגדל יחכם, כיום שראיתי יושן לחורבנה. ואמר שמואל, והוא שנדור באותו היום. You have to make that promise on that day. Like 20 weeks later, let's say, it has to be on that Sunday that you made the day. So, what's the case? And we said it's asur, and it's going to work. So what's the case? Lav kegon dekai bechad b'shabbat demit be'avua. Isn't the case that the father died on a Sunday? Ve'af agav de'ikatu v'chad b'shabbat dehetera. Even though there was many Sundays of heter that you ate meat in between. Viktani asur. Now it says asur. That means shmami. Now we learn from here beikar hu matvis. You're going back to that first Sunday, even though there's 20 Sundays in the middle. I'm going back to that original one. So this zekazeh would be you go like the ikar, which is a korban, not what it is now after Zukat Amim. Answers the Gemara 4 lines up. The Shmuel hachi itmar. What Shmuel said, this is what he meant. Shmuel ve'hu shenadur uba me'oto hayom ve'elach. Says that Shmuel that the case was that you fasted shenadur uba me'oto hayom ve'elach. That you're going to fast from that day and onward. Right? Ve'hu shenadur uba me'oto hayom ve'elach. You fasted every year or every
Nadur
week.
Is fast, or?
No, nadur is neder.
Yeah.
So who's nadur uba and like going forward, meoto hayom ve'elach, from that day and onward.
So, like, if he's supposed to fast every Sunday, let's say, and there will be Sundays which are Yom Tov, which he cannot fast. So,
Okay, excluding those.
well, like, how can you make a neder that every Sunday you're gonna
Excludes.
fast? Because it's technically not possible. So you cannot make a neder like that's what we learned before. You cannot make something a
That's
neder
not gonna-
that's not technically possible.
It's impossible to follow Yom Tov. No.
Why? Sundays fall on Yom Tov. Yom Tovs fall on Sunday.
No, he goes by the date.
No, he says Sunday.
No, it doesn't have to be Sunday.
No, he says
It can fall
Sundays.
on a different day next year.
No, he doesn't say.
No, but now
No,
in the answer,
no.
what is it? Shmuel says v'hu shenadur uba meoto hayom ve'elach. That he's fasting every year, not just that one year.
On the
So it's-
anniversary of his father's death. That's what
Right.
it says here.
So the answer is that it's gonna latch on because it's the day of the Nachala. It's not like in the original thought it was 20 Sundays later. He says, I'm making this Sunday like the day my father's passing. So okay, that works. You can't eat meat this day. What do you mean? There was other 21 in the between that you didn't. So you see, we go back to the original. Says the Gemara, no, don't use that as a proof because really the case was it was on the day of the fast. It was the first yortzeit. He says, I want this to be like mamash, like that yortzeit before, and I'm going to keep this every single yortzeit afterwards. So then that goes back to that date, and that there's no heter in between. That's mamash yortzeit to yortzeit to yortzeit to yortzeit. So that basically undoes our question, and we're still don't have an answer for the zekazeh. Okay.
So what happens when they do like Atara Nedarim? Does he skip the Atara Nedarim so he can continue with his neders that he wants to keep because he's strong on them, or like
That's a good
I know
choice.
it's not related.
Yeah,
I was just
yeah.
wondering.
I think you
Every
could
year
exclude
you-
certain things. I think you could exclude certain things if you want that.
I think you should have like when you do a Teret Nadarim, you should have in mind which nedars you are doing a Teret Nadarim for, because otherwise.
Or if there's certain nedarim that you want to keep.
No, because the
Oh yeah,
text
because,
covers
yeah,
everything.
yeah, it covers
Like the
everything.
This is
And
also the
call
first
me
time-
Lord.
But certain things have minhag, like I know my father has a minhag to fast on his parents'
By the way, we also
nachala.
have it.
Yeah, the minhag to fast on your father's
It's a
nachala.
lost one, but originally we had it.
Yeah, so I don't think my father has. It's became the custom. It's like the minhag. I don't think my father has to Like I don't think the Hatar Nedarim undoes it, and then every year he's got to make a neder or
No, but
And
the
just-
Minhag is different because he never made that statement that he's
Right,
going to
just-
do it. He's just been doing it as
yeah, that's like the Jewish custom or Moroccan custom or Sephardic custom, whatever.
But isn't it the first time we hear about recurring neder? I never heard that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I missed it.
Recurring neder.
Recurring neder. I
Right.
thought it's like okay, you start the neder, you don't delay
30
it.
days, right?
30 day, and so you finish it.
It's Nazarut.
Right.
It's not all the Nedarim.
Now here you're saying this last point was you're saying you want this to be like your father's, and you're going to be going forward.
So, like, he wants to fast every 25th, 21st week of.
No, it's mamash the day
Anniversary
of the passing.
Yeah.
Nachala, nachala.
Yeah, but so what about the 21st one? So, like, where did it come from?
No, like the 20 weeks later, or whatever. When he just made up. He just I want this day to be like, oh, it was a Sunday. I reminded my dad he died on a Sunday. I want this Sunday today like to be like that day. So at first we thought, okay, that's going to be Asur. Even though there's all these days of Heterim in the middle, we go back to that original day. So it's a proof. Zekazez, you go back to the original. And so the Gemara, no, that's not the case. The case was it was on the year of the yard So I want it to be like that original day. And then and going forward, I'm always going to
Because he
fast.
fasted on that day, that's why the neder can take on, right? If he didn't fast on that day,
yeah, then he didn't do anything.
He
right,
didn't say anything, right?
Right. Okay. Here we go. Next, 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Ravina, Tashma, Kechalat Aharon ukitrumato. Person says, I want this piece of bread to be like the chala of Aharon. Like when a person gives chala, it goes to the Kohanim, which is asur for a person to eat, and like truma. Truma is for Kohanim. Mutar. It is allowed for a person to eat it. So if I say, I want this piece of bread to be like truma. Truma is intrinsically asur. We're going to see about that, but the Gemara is saying it's like intrinsically asur, and I can't connect a neder something that's intrinsically asur, like chazir, and therefore I can't. It's mutar. I'm allowed to eat this piece of bread, but haket trumat lachmet todah asur. But like the truma of the breads of todah, that's asur. Korban todah had 40 breads that were brought with it, and Kohanim, you would give 4 of those to the Kohanim. The other 36 the person could eat, and he would also give it out. And the truth is, Korban todah had to be eaten within a day, and that's why people that it's all this bread. What will you do? You would give it out to friends. You give it out to people. So they also give a todah to Hashem. When you give a todah, you always want to spread that todah. So, but if I say I want this to be like trumat lachmet todah, that truma from the lachmet todah that goes to the Kohen, that's asur, because it at one point was mutar. Okay. Yeah, so we said there's 40 loaves, 1/10 of each of those 40, and the 40 loaves is 10 of this, 10 of this, 10 of this, 10 of this, then rikikin, matzot, chalot, we'll see, revichin, so 1/10 to the Kohen, 1/10 to the Kohen, 1/10 to the Kohen, 1/10, so it ends up being 4 out of 40 for the Kohanim. So that is something that was allowed, and then asur. So if I compare it to that bread, it's also going to be asur. Kematfis b'davar hanadur is the bottom run, the last line. Hakatzumat lachmet todah. Chala achad she'hi noten mikol 10 chalot shel kol min sheba asur de'av aleh, because it's like matfis b'davar hanadur. It's matfis b'davar hanadur. It's if you say matfis b'davar ha'asur, that's a chazir. I want to connect this to something that's already asur intrinsically. Doesn't work, and this is going to be mutar. If I'm matfis b'davar hanadur, something that was already a neder on, so these lachmet todas, it's going to be asur. Okay, let's see. Says the Gemara, "Vehat trumat lachme toda lachar zrikat damim hi." Says the Gemara, the same type of question like before. Trumat lachme toda was only a truma to the Kohanim after the zrikat dam of the korban. Korban was korban toda is an actual animal, and then the breads that you give to the Kohen. So the animal did the shechita, then you did the zrikat damim. So it's after zrikat damim, and then you give the breads to the Kohen. So when you give the breads to the Kohen, it's after zrikat damim. After zrikat damim, everything's allowed. So why would it be asur? That trumat lachme toda is after zrikat damim. So if you look at the top run, dekevan de lachme toda lo sharu b'achila ad la'achar zrika. These breads were not allowed only after the sprinkling of the blood. Lama yitremu otan kodem lachen. Why would you give them to the Kohen as truma beforehand? You would give it after. Umediktani asur, since it says asur, meaning if I compare this bread of mine to trumat lachme toda la'achar zrikat damim, trumat lachme toda, it's going to be asur. Why is it asur? Truma lachme toda is after zrikat damim. That's a time that's mutar. It must be that I'm connecting to the ikar. And I'm connected to the ikar, that means this question is going back onto the zekazeh, that I'm saying this piece of meat is like this shlamim. Do I look at it now or do I look at it like the ikar? It looks like it's like the ikar. Says the Gemara, Ema ketrumat halishka asur. Says the Gemara, no, it's not. Don't look at it. We're not talking about a case of trumat lachme toda, rather trumat halishka. Trumat halishka was the machatzit shekel. Machatzit shekel was once a regular coin, and now you're donating it from machatzit. You made it holy. So that is, I can compare this piece of bread to that, because this piece of bread is a random piece of bread or a random piece of meat or a random coin, and now I'm saying this is like machatzit shekel, then that's going to be asur, because machatzit shekel was once something that was mutar, and through a neder became asur. But hold on, says the Gemara, if we're not talking about lachme toda anymore, avat trumat lachme toda mai mutar, meaning we just fell off of trumat lachme toda. We tried with trumat lachme toda. Achar zrikat damim. We want to say that therefore you go to ikaran. So no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trumat lishka, which is asur. So trumat lishka is asur. Trumat lachme toda is mutar. If trumat lachme toda is mutar, velitni lachme toda vekol sheken trumato. Then if lachme toda is going to be allowed, meaning when I'm comparing this, my thing to lachme toda, it's mutar, litni lachme toda, then teach us lachme toda, which is allowed, and all the more so truma. The kosher can trumato. Because truma machatzit shekel, litni lachme toda, the kosher can trumato. It's looking at the run. Litni trumat lachme toda, v'kol sheken trumato, v'havia ributa tfei, mishum de meikara ne'eseret, mishum de ikara ne'esra, trumat lachme toda beneder. What's this question here? תשומתו היא לחמי תודה וכל שכן תשומתו. לחמי תודה וכל שכן תשומתו. כמה שמע תשומת לחמי תודה ותשומתו היא. So if you look at the Ran תרומתו היא, כלומר בכלל וכתרומתו דקטני היא משום דהביה כתרומה לגבי זרים. This korban לחמי תודה is like truma lezarim. To a non-Kohen, it's going to be asur. And to a non-Kohen, if it's asur, then it's like intrinsically asur. And not, it's intrinsically asur, and not, it's like chazir. It's intrinsically asur. If it's intrinsically asur, then it's going to be mutar. You can't compare your piece of bread to that. Okay, so again, the top line asks the question, Trumat Lachmei Todah la'achar Zvikat Tamim hi. Trumat Lachmei Todah is after Zvikat Tamim. You give the breads after you do the Korban Todah. And then it should be mutar. No, then we go from the Ikar. Says the Gemara, no, we're talking about Machatzit HaShekel. Trumat HaLishka, Asur. And Machatzit HaShekel is like a neder, and therefore if I'm comparing my bread to that, then it's fine, because Machatzit HaShekel is once mutar. So ask the Gemara, Aval Trumat Lachmei Todah Mai mutar? Trumat Lachmei Todah, are you going to say that that's mutar? Meaning it's intrinsically asur? Litni Lachmei Todah v'kol sheken Trumato. And that's what the Gemara answers. Hakamash v'lan Trumat Lachmei Todah Trumatohi. No, Trumat Lachmei Todah is intrinsically asur, as the Ran says, because it's asur for zarim, it's intrinsically asur. And that's why, if it's intrinsically asur, it's mutar. This is where I said it's hard. But I know it's a little bit late. So let's, I think, even though we were supposed to finish this Amud, let's pause over here. We'll, for sure from Amar Ravina, we'll repeat this question. We'll get this good, and let's see if we can do a full daf for Sunday. If not, the Amud, and then next week, I think it'll be Wednesday, we'll do the full daf. At least we'll finish the parak. Okay? It was a little bit of a tough one.
That's not
Okay.
directly
Zakhar
related to the Mishnah.